Hidden in the depths of the GD code, there are a ton of interesting glitches. Due to a code limitation in C++, geometry dash completely breaks at extreme values, either with crazy FPS or super long levels. Tonight, we will look at how crazy glitches were discovered, and even some I discovered on my own. Let's take a deep dive into the hidden parts of GD and discover the true geometry dash Farlands. Let's start by giving you some examples of these strange bugs, but with a twist. I will give you 4 images, and one of them will be completely fake. I'll give you 5 seconds to think, so here we go. Okay, have you guessed it? The fake one is the cursed jumping wave, and how the other images are possible, I'll show you in a later chapter. But now, let's look at some other weird images. I discovered a Farlands bug myself actually. But sadly, I don't have any actual footage of me finding it, since it happened on a late night of research, but it's pretty cool regardless in my opinion. So, let me explain this video right here. Your first thoughts could be, yeah, that's obviously fake, you can see he put a speed portal in the middle of the jump. No. Turn on the hitboxes. As you can see, no speed portal. If you use this setup file, you can access a seemingly random level with a few triggers and a start pause. As after inputting a specific value, that value is not random and changes depending on the conditions. I can move the start pause to a really big number from the spot. Then I created this, and on the exact coordinates and this exact FPS and this exact speed, the X velocity of the player changes just in time for me to be able to clear the jump. There is also an old level called Sakupen wall, which people joke to oblivion. It consists of a single wall in the middle of the level. And of course, it was considered physically impossible. But when you get inside of it and pause and change your FPS to this extreme value, you will stop moving completely, thus being able to scale the massive wall without dying. When you are on the top, set your FPS back to 60 and you can complete the level. You might be now wondering, how do these bugs occur? And why exactly that number is the limit? Also a quick disclaimer, this video will be a really deep dive, it will be a lot technical. So feel free to ask about anything in the comments or tag me on Twitter if you didn't understand it. Well, with that out of the way, let's dive right into it. You thought you knew all the geometry dash levels list? You fool. I found the PILL, or the physically impossible levels list, and subsequently, the theoretically possible levels list. We will never have enough level lists, it seems like. You may ask yourself, if the list is physically impossible, how can it rank levels? And why would someone even do it? You see, I asked myself that question as well, but it seems like every PILL levels has some crash trigger set up, and it triggers like 10 times a second in the hardest levels, and that's why they are physically impossible. They are ranked by seconds when they are impossible. That's why you can see giant scaled saws in most PILL levels. This is it. This is the hardest level ever created. Does it even exist anymore? Are we real? What's even the purpose of our puny lives anymore? But there is no room for such questions. This is only you and a white screen. For years. This is Emptiness by Euler now, the current top 1 on the PILL. Its furthest block is placed at approximately 2.4 times 10 to the power of 38. To put that into perspective, Timeless by Cyrillic is only 2.5 billion years long, and its furthest block is placed only at approximately 3.8 times 10 to the power of 19 units. You may ask yourself, how long is this level then? And I can answer that. It's 43 octillion years long. It also has a super big scaled up saw that follows you the entire level and a crash trigger setup activated every 0.1 second, making this level completely humanly impossible. These levels are however physically impossible, meaning they cannot be completed without the use of no-clip, similar hacks. But what's the hardest physically possible level? To answer this question, I will look at the hardest levels list. Most of the levels here are just crazy weird click counters, but the top one stands out. It's probably the hardest possible level in 2.1, and its name is Nessus. But until we get to it, we should first explain the bugs that make it possible. The exposition limit is a game limit that occurs after a really far point in a level. For example, after reaching around 16 hours on 60 FPS, it completely prevents you from moving forward and freezes you in place. This highly depends on your FPS, the closer, the higher it is, as well as your speed, with faster speeds allowing you to move further. This is also what allows you to complete levels like Sakupen Wall, mentioned at the start of the video, as you can still jump while frozen. But what's the cause of it? You see, Geometry Dash is coded in programming language known as C++. Why is that important here, you may ask? Well, we need to investigate the way GD stores its player's exposition. Obviously, it's a number. I won't dive a lot into this, but the short answer to that question is that it is in fact stored as a value called a float in C++. A float is one of lots of data types in C++, which means it's a variable or an array. It just stores some numbers. Now, the important stuff for GD is the float, which stores a number as a decimal with a floating point. However, and this is where the problem arises, is that these values have a decimal limit. When a number, let's say our float tries to store the number 1/3, or 0.33 with the 3's periodically repeating to infinity. Now to store this number, you would need infinite numbers, or in short terms, infinite memory. We don't have infinite memory, we only have 32 bits. That means C++ has to shorten this number, so it ends the decimal after its 6th digit and rounds it up or down. So in our case, C++ would store this exact number as 0.333333. That means we lose some precision, and this feature is named the floating point precision. So we can get to how exactly C++ stores numbers. This is it, with each box representing a bit, so 1 or 0. The sign has only one bit, so it can be 1 or 0. This determines if the number is positive or negative. The second part is the exponent, which has 8 bits and can be a value from 0 to 256. And this is just the number we will multiply by the decimals, or mantissa. Mantissa has 23 bits and it determines the decimals, so it will be like 0 point decimals. But because of the floating point, it can be moved, so the maximum number for a float is much bigger than 128. By the way, for those wondering, this is the formula we can use to calculate the float. However, we have to convert the binary numbers to a normal number system we use. Now, you might be asking yourself, how does this all apply to GD? And I promise, I'll get to it eventually. But for now, let's declare some more facts about the float. The floats can store 2 to the power of 32 possible numbers, but the maximum possible number is in fact 3.402823466 times 10 to the power of 38, and that number is much larger than the number of possible numbers. Due to this quote-unquote bug, big numbers are stored very, and I mean very unprecisely, because a lot of numbers are missing. Now, we can finally get to Geometry Dash again. At the far expositions, a float is the number representing the player's movement to the right of a screen, so the expos is very inaccurate because the numbers to store this position don't exist. You could call this a RobTop error, because a lot of bugs in-game are caused by the developer not paying attention to playtesting and such, but this one is different. In fact, RobTop could have made this problem less noticeable, but he couldn't prevent it, so some of you that know a bit about C++ may ask, well, why didn't he just use doubles instead? They are double the size, so it should mean double the precision. I'll answer that in a minute. Now, let me just explain what doubles are. A double is another C++ data type, just like a float. But the main difference between the two is how much and how precisely they can store the numbers. You see, a float can only store 32 bits, thus the maximum number of symbols it can store is 2 to the power of 32, while a double as its name suggests, can store 64 bits, which means it's much more accurate. But to answer the previously mentioned question, Rob probably decided not to because of performance. You see, double the memory required also means the game will be much more hardware demanding, and with the amount of data GD would store, the demand would be much bigger than with basic floats. The second possible answer is that Rob never thought we as the player base would push these limits this hard, thus he didn't bother with it, which is also completely understandable. This bug also happens on the y-axis, with it working basically the same but vertically, preventing you from jumping or overall moving up and leaving you frozen midair. With that out of the way, we can move on to another one, the scroll speed bug. The scroll speed bug could look really similar to the XPos slowdown, but it isn't. Depending on the FPS you are at, the game slows down or up very slightly. To demonstrate this change, we can look at this video by Fokuto. He ran multiple instances of the same level but on different FPS, and we can see that the one on 3000 FPS is very behind at the finish line. But it may seem that the other ones are the same? No. When you go frame by frame close to the finish wall, you can see that the higher FPS, the slower the game runs. Now, why is this? Short answer, Rob thought making a mistake. Note that this is a common cause for weird GD bugs. To see how this works, we can use this equation to determine the effects of SSB, where the n is the actual exposition change, even according to the scroll speed. This chart has the value for n at all speeds. As I already told you, the float is super inaccurate at bigger numbers, so it will start rounding numbers up or down, so your movement can for example do this. This is the cause for all of the bugs in this video, not only is SSB, but when rounded, your speed can slightly increase or decrease depending on your FPS, and at some point, it will round everything to 0, thus making the XPos limit. Now, this is the time to tell you that you've been lied to for years about speed changes. No, the 4x speed portal doesn't make you go 4 times faster, in fact, it's only about 1.8 times the normal speed. Here's the full chart if you are interested. Also a quick note, this was tested by Fokuto on a 10 billion block level, so it should be really accurate. It should also be mentioned that the follow player X function on the move trigger is not accounting for SSB nor the XPos limit, so we can break in longer levels. It will just move as it's supposed to if it weren't for those things. As I already said before, a float is really inaccurate as big numbers, even though I'm now repeating myself, and that also applies to block positions, not only player ones. To see how this works, at the start of a level, the loss of exact number coordinates is only about 0.000001 units, but around the 60 FPS XPos limit, it can reach even up to 3 units, which is 1/10 of a block. You could say that the small number which precision loss is at the start of a level, that wouldn't affect anything, right? But it really does. In Terraria by Scub, a level that is only 1.5 minutes long, the objects have really small gaps between them due to this exact bug. Around 16 hours in a level, this becomes really noticeable. Just look at these slopes being placed off the grid. Now, let's move on to Nessus, the level explanation you've all been waiting for this entire video, and now we'll be able to understand. This is the current hardest physically possible level in GD, above popular levels like Tower or To the End of Time. To put its difficulty into perspective, if you combine the difficulty of every single physically possible level on the servers, that's not an Nessus copy, it will be still over 10 to the power of 9,000 times easier than this level, which means 1 and 9,000 zeros. The level takes advantage of the XPos limit, making it require 5 million FPS, which makes the player stop moving on the x-axis inside an extremely tight UFO gap right before a wall. Inside the gap, there are exactly 322,560 multi-activate black orbs. Now what that means is multi-activate orbs can be activated only once in a single frame, so by doing a double click, you can click the orb once and then jump right after, and in the next frame, the orb can be activated again. In here though, instead of double clicking, you have to click all the 322,560 orbs in one frame, so none of them can be clicked again, and then jump with both players, as the level has 2-player mode activated. You have to spam like this for a very long time. And no, this doesn't make it physically impossible to the laws of physics. You can pause an infinite amount of times per frame, so you can pause and pause to complete all clicks per frame without the game ever advancing a single frame. Once you're stuck in the gap, a spawn trigger loop will activate and add 1 to a counter every 4 seconds. Any higher value will break on FPS that high, which once again is caused by floating point precision. The counter consists of 1098 pickup and instant count triggers stacked on top of each other. When the first counter reaches this number, or the 32-bit integer limit, it overflows and loops all the way back to the negative 32-bit integer limit, and eventually goes back to 0. Whenever it reaches 0, it adds 1 to a second counter, which again overflows and goes back to 0. This adds 1 to a third counter, etc. It repeats until the 1098th counter goes back to 0. In total, this process finishes after this many seconds, and no, I'm not gonna read it all. The XPos limit depends not only on your FPS, but also on your speed. On slow speed and 5 million FPS, it's about 256 units or 8.5 blocks, but on 4 times speed, it's actually 512 units or 17 blocks. So when the last counter reaches the maximum number and everything gets toggled off, you can just jump up and hit the speed change to extend the XPos limit beyond the wall, so you are able to move again and complete the level. This level needs around this many TPS, and its total length is around this number. It has over 10,000 digits, making it by far the hardest level in geometry. Now, to get to the interesting bugs you've seen at the start of this video. How are they made? And how can you get that far in your level? Well, in fact, the most obvious solution is to wait multiple hours for a level to get to the buggy mess that is around 2000 minutes in the level. But who'd want to wait that long just to show their friends a funny bug they found? There is, of course, a better solution, which you probably have guessed, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing this video, because no bugs would be shown to the community. You can use this table made by Skubs and Melting Ice and this exploit setup level made by Blanket Addict, links in the description, to achieve the same effects, but with much less time and effort required. First, you choose how far you want to go, and find it in this table. Then you look at the number below and divide it by 3. Then download the XPos setup level from the link in the description and input the number you got from the equation into the move trigger. Then we will execute this weird bug for the move triggers to activate, even though the level has a start pause afterwards. You first click and hold the playtest button, then press escape and release your mouse. Then go to save and exit and click on it, and voila, you have a really long level of your choosing. This is the way Blanket Addict discovered the bugs at the start of this video, and how I discovered my own. So, this was the Farlands of GD. This was such a big project, and I am so glad I pulled through. I want to really thank multiple people, many Euler's number. He taught me most of the technical stuff, and thanks to him this video was made possible. Then Blanket Addict, who even introduced me to the Farlands, and helped me with the 1st and 5th chapters. And last but not least, Skubs, who wrote chapter 4 and assisted me in other technical explanations. And of course, thanks to all of you for watching. Go follow me and the guys that helped me make this video, links are in the descriptions. With that, these were the Farlands of GD, and I hope new interesting bugs like this will also be found in the future. And see you later.